What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news. And today, we have some free agency news to discuss, so let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're back with some Detroit Lions news. And according to Adam Schefter, the Detroit Lions are re-signing cornerback Kindle Vildor on a one-year deal, reuniting with now Detroit Lions coach DeShea Townsend, who was with the Chicago Bears when they drafted Kindle Vildor in round 5 in 2020. But he was also with Kindle Vildor in 2021. We saw his first real massive steps in terms of snap counts defensively. And this was part of the reason I thought for sure the Lions were going to be drafting a cornerback at some point this year, because where DeShea Townsend is coming from, specifically with the Chicago Bears, bringing along young guys was a big part of that, kind of resetting that cornerback and defensive back room. And Kindle Vildor was a part of that, so it definitely brings back ties here. I thought Vildor actually did a lot of good with the Lions in a very small sample size, which is very difficult to look at the stats because it was such a small sample size with the Lions this past season. You really also have to look at the playoff statistics as well. However, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily surprised by this re-signing. Actually, going back to the beginning of free agency, when I did my free agent predictions for Bleacher Report before it all kicked off, one of the re-signings that I had was the Detroit Lions bringing back Kindle Vildor. Now, I also had other moves that did not happen, but one of those guys was Vildor, and I made this little graphic. It's definitely not anything fancy, but right here where I put Jerry Jacobs stats, Kindle Vildor stats, and Will Harris, and those were kind of the three that I discussed, and I had predicted that the guy that they would bring back would be Kindle Vildor. Now, the main reason I did that is because I just liked how Kindle Vildor played this past season. Now, the stats don't really back that up in a lot of ways outside of completion percentage being pretty low. That's good, but there's not a lot of, even historically, a lot of production on the football in terms of pass breakups. Only has the one interception. So, and if you look at the small sample size with the Lions, really the yards kind of get away from you, because a game like Dallas, for example, where it's like, okay, he's playing pretty well, and all of a sudden you give up a 92-yard touchdown, it shakes everything up. Or you have a play like the San Francisco 49ers game where he gives up the big shot play. He's in a great position, probably should have been an interception, turns into a massive completion. So all of the good that was there, you're like, what the heck was that? He was in position, he just didn't make a play on the football. So the numbers get skewed very quickly, especially the yards, because he just gave up some big plays like that where he was in a position, but he just gave up the play. With that being said, though, just watching Kindle Vildor, he's really took on the role pretty quickly with the Lions right after we signed him, and I didn't know much about the guy. I knew that he had been with the Chicago Bears in the past, but as soon as I watched him, and we did a little breakdown video on the player when we added him to the practice squad originally, and I was like, man, this guy actually looks pretty darn good. I was like, I kind of like this player. And then when he stepped in for the Lions, it started off as kind of like a rotation, right? You had the Chicago game, then you had the Denver game with a guy like Khalil Dorsey, and then they just went fully with Kindle Vildor, and I thought he helped us a lot. Again, he didn't make really plays on the football that you would have hoped for, but he did a lot of good. And at cornerback is one of those positions where a lot of times the only thing that we're going to see from the broadcast view is when you give up the completion or you make a play on the football. That's when you'll get the replays. That's when you'll see it. But if the ball is not thrown your way, we don't necessarily always see that. Or maybe, hey, why did the quarterback look away from that? Or even just some of the incomplete passes that are targeted towards him, but maybe it's a throwaway, but yet he was in a good position. There's a lot of those things that, don't kind of stick with us. But what I always liked about Kindle Vildor, and it was just as simple as his ability to stay in phase with the receiver, I loved it. I was like, hey, this guy is sticky. He stays in phase and coverage. He just needs to finish these plays more consistently. So that's why I was bought into bringing Kindle Vildor back. He's only 26 years old, 5'11", 190 pounds. And just skill set wise, before we talk about this a little bit deeper, he has a full man coverage skill set. Like, that's what he's built to do, is play man coverage. And I also think he showed some versatility with us because we did some zone. We mixed it in there too, especially cover 3 defensively. But off man coverage, press man coverage, like, he's built to play in that stylistically. So it even makes more sense now that the Lions want to even more once again this upcoming season, that the Lions would be interested in bringing a player like this back who is built for that stylistically, who's built to be successful in man coverage defensively. And that's what I want to touch on here. So athletically speaking, coming out for the draft, right, he ran a 4.4 40, had a 1.49 10-yard split. I mean, those are incredible speed numbers, explosive numbers as well. Tied at the 1.49 split is awesome, and you definitely see that from off-man coverage. And just some of the things that stood out when watching him, so much to like about the man coverage upside. When you talk about the balance, the patience that he plays with from off-man coverage, the way that he stays on his toes, the wide base, it opens up so much as an off-man coverage corner. The plant and drive explosiveness on the top of the route. I also thought he showed very comfortably in half-turn coverage. And of course, this wasn't just man. Sometimes it was cover 3 as well. But very comfortably in half-turn, protecting his blind spot, not getting himself flipped around, being being patient with how he's going to protect it, but then also being able to get on top of the route, using off-man eye balance towards the quarterback. Sometimes I thought I leaned a little bit too heavy to reading the quarterback, and he kind of lose the route late, but leaning in towards that eye balance to step in front of, level 3 routes that were getting set up. The off-man coverage to half turn, he looked natural in those spots. And then when you start to go to, okay, well, as a press cornerback, this is an area where he has a lot of the skill set. The lateral twitch is there, the burst off the line of scrimmage, the transition is solid, adequate, transition ability off the line of scrimmage to get into the stem of a route. So when you talk about that, tied along with the length that he also carries for a cornerback at his size, he was effective in press. And you would see some of the jams at the line of scrimmage that would connect. Even here, like the 49ers against Brandon Ayuk, he connects right with him off the line of scrimmage, and then being able to still kind of stay in phase with the route, not completely lose balance after creating the jam at the line of scrimmage. So he was just natural in a lot of man coverage situations. Now in zone coverage, there's probably more knocks that could be there, but again, we're bringing a guy back, and we're probably going to be playing even more man this upcoming season. But I still did like in cover 3 spots how fast he picked it up, because when he first started playing with us, there were times, like I can remember the first game that we had him defensively, and there was a few occasions where we were like, oh man, he's not really getting to his spot for what we're asking him to do defensively. And then immediately the next week, those things started to click, and it was very fast, very quick learner to pick up what the Lions wanted him to do defensively, and it was like, oh, it's already clicking, like this is going to work out. And then he just took off and snapped. So to me, I think that's a big part of the reason that the rotation didn't last that long, because at first it was like, okay, we got to kind of dial this in, and it was immediate how fast he picked it up, and he was like, okay, I'm rolling, let's go with this defense. And that was good. And I thought, especially again in cover 3 spots, you would see it. One thing that I always liked about Jerry Jacobs, realized there's not a route threat on his side, and he would drop out, he'd find the crossing route, find a play action set, and just understand that's what the offense tried to set up and kind of take that away. Now again, I did think that his eye balance could lead to a heavy quarterback. He kind of run himself out of plays, or especially on broken plays, you could get some issues. You have other zone coverage issues that can pop up as well, whether that's getting just too aggressive underneath in zone coverage, and also at times, not always maybe on him, but just communicating to pass off routes. He was pretty natural, just kind of the technique that the Lions were looking for. And what he has he has the man ability when you talk about, again, kind of the balance that he consistently plays with, some of the explosive bursts that he plays with, the lateral movement skills, which are super impressive, especially from off band when he's able to sit on top of a route, but then also some of the lean at the top of the route. And that was always huge. The ability to lean at the top of the route, stick with speed out routes, stick with crossers. He was pretty good at that. He had that flexion within his game, and it really helped him as a man coverage corner. Now, there were some real knocks here. As fast as he is, recovery speed didn't always seem to match. When he would get caught behind, he would get stacked way too often. I thought for him, trying to recover and be fluid, like I'm going to get in the hip of the receiver and kind of work and trail, didn't think that was fluid. He constantly looks for connection, so he wants to get contact with the receiver, and when it's not clean, I thought things got kind of messy for him. Always thought you could see a little bit of stiffness and kind of the footwork at the line of scrimmage, for example, maybe opening his hips, maybe not matching with the foot fire to just kind of mirror the receiver off the line of scrimmage. And then even some of the pacing here through the stem is just not as fluid to get into the hip and really be able to maintain throughout. It wasn't always fluid in those spots. The recovery speed could get thrown off to me by just angles in general, just the way that he was approaching a receiver. But then you would also throw in the aspect of just making plays on the football. And this feels like it was such a small sample size with the Lions, it's kind of hard to gauge this a little bit, because at least you should have had a PBU against San Fran that turned into a big play. But I would say you saw a lot of examples where it was either just a big play the offense made, it was a great catch, an awesome throw, and it's just like he was in a spot to make a play on the football, and it just did not happen. And from what I've seen, I didn't think a ton of it was that he couldn't find the football. It seemed like he usually knew where the ball was, so it wasn't that issue of like, oh, he's not getting his head around. Like, he would find the ball. I think some of that can come back to anticipating where the route is going and where they want to get the ball to. So on time, you just saw like, okay, they would just be a little bit better on time than he was in coverage, and you would get some of the anticipation plays made on the football. He would carry the length, and he carried some physicality, and you would see it especially early on routes. You also saw, again, the eye balance would find the quarterback, so he could kind of disrupt outside of his route as well. But that was always the thing. He wasn't making plays on the football, and that is an area that definitely needs to come along for him to be successful and honestly make the team, in my opinion. I think you have to see some of that anticipation grow for the Lions. You're going to have to see it in preseason and training camp where he's making more plays on the football for him to prove that, like, hey, I should be on this team because I'm young enough, I'm athletic enough. I just need to see some of that anticipation to then go make plays on the football. Maybe more comfortability in this defense will help him there, but I think that's a big step that they need. And hopefully reuniting with DeShea, that he sees that as well. But to me, this was always one of those guys that I liked. I understood the numbers didn't look great, this past season specifically. playoffs, he allowed 13 receptions on 20 targets, which isn't bad, 65% completion percentage, but 260 yards, a touchdown, no picks. That's a 125 passer rating. I can understand the numbers, but when you just watch him, there's still a lot of aspects of his game that I really liked, especially when you consider his age and his athleticism and his size. And as a run defender, he's capable there. He would make plays on screens. You saw that early when he was with the Lions. Though he would get caught on his heels as a run defender, kind of let the runner get to him, and then he could be made miss by running backs trying to set an edge. Like, he didn't attack as much as a run support player that you would like to see, especially when he was outmatched in terms of size. However, there was just a lot of aspects of this player's game that I did like. I thought he helped us this past season. You're not going to view Kindle Vildor as a starter this next year. I don't know, maybe he plays himself into that, but I think he did well to warrant bringing him back for competition through training camp, and I think that's what this is. So I still anticipate the Lions are going to draft a cornerback somewhere in this draft, but it does fill out some more depth for the Lions, and I just think he did well. Like, if you're looking at all the cornerbacks, right, we brought back Khalil Dorsey. I like Khalil Dorsey from preseason. They like him on special teams too. If you're just looking at who produced that cornerback last year, what the Lions kind of revamped that whole room, to me, out of those guys, when we did the Will Harris, Jerry Jacobs, Kindle Vildor, to me, Kindle Vildor was the guy that stood out the most. He was the guy that was like, hey, this guy looks the best from week to week. We just have to dial in certain aspects of his game. But you kind of know what you're going to get from the player at this point. So with that, Kindle Vildor is back. I like the addition to bring him back. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.